As the pack reels from Allison's death, Nogitsune Stiles makes his final move. Isaac figures out how Allison killed the Oni. Derek rallies the twins to Scott's cause, and the final battle ends in a divine move at the high school. Hello, entertainment enthusiasts. This is Ray, and this is the Fandom Realm. And today I am reviewing episode number 24 of season 3, called The Divine Move, and this is my number 4 ranked Teen Wolf episode. As always, this is a spoiler review, so just be warned. I am continuing in the same fashion as I have in the past countdown review videos. So we're going to go in different parts and we'll talk about each part, and then you'll be able to skip to that part in a time code if you need to. All right, everybody, so we're going to start out with point number 1 here, and this is happening basically right after Allison's death. Chris Argent is helping Scott come up with a story to tell the police. The story they end up coming up with is that 2 men were trying to steal their car, and that one of them had something sharp. Scott didn't know whether it was a knife, though. Scott is told to repeat that everything happened very quickly if he doesn't know what to say. Of course, Isaac is there too, and Chris is telling all 3 of them what they need to say. Scott is confused by how calmly Chris handles Allison's death, and Chris finally just explains that it's part of their job. Lydia, Scott, and Isaac are all questioned by Deputy Parrish, and they all stick to their story. Now, when we look at this scene, it is just so sad with what was going on, and when Argent says that it's just part of the job, boy, that's just an emotional spike for you. And just this whole idea that Allison was dead and gone and not the series anymore. This was a real emotional time for everyone. I know there's more than one person out there that thought something was going to happen, that it was all a mistake, but of course it wasn't. Now, moving on to number 2, and that is going to take place at the Yukimuras. The Yukimuras have taken Stiles to their home, and while there, they are all going to be discussing how Allison was able to kill an Oni because Kira's mom and dad both are unsure how she did it. Nashiko explains that the Nogitsune made a powerful move when he split from Stiles. Mr. Yukimura suggests they need a divine move to turn the game around and reverse the Nogitsune's upper hand. Kira reminds her mom of the time she trapped the Nogitsune using the power of the Nematon, and they all decide they need to talk to Deaton to see if they can use anything from the Nematon to trap the Nogitsune again. Okay, this scene, I thought it gave us just a little bit of okay, this scene, not a whole lot to say about this, but I like this idea of a divine move and that they're going to have to take a big chance somewhere. And then we also get back into this idea of how Kira's mom actually had trapped the Nogitsune all those years before. That's going to lead us to Deaton. Now, with point number 3, we're going to see that Isaac accompanies Chris back to his apartment. The two are going to discuss Allison's death, and Chris tells Isaac that he's able to compartmentalize his emotions, but an emotional Isaac says that he is not trained to compartmentalize his emotions, and the two hug. At the sheriff's station, Sheriff Stilinski tells Parrish to keep the death quiet. They don't want the media to be all over the kids. While they're talking, the Oni are going to appear and kill one of the deputies. Elsewhere, Derek uses a Zippo lighter to treat Ethan's wounds at the loft and warns that they could be found again by their attacker. Aiden wants to leave Beacon Hills with Lydia, but Derek says she'll never leave because of Scott. Derek explains that the twins do not understand Scott's desire to protect his friends, and they should be fighting for his cause if they want to be part of his pack. So he encourages them to find another way to redeem themselves and stand up and fight. Now, this little section of scenes, I was really into Isaac and Chris's relationship growing here, and of course we do know at the end Isaac did go off with Chris to Europe, and so they're going to have a little bit of a bond here. Of course, some of this also starts Nogitsune Stiles' attack on everyone as they're going to attack the sheriff's station. Of course, I'm getting ready to mention going to the hospital and then attacking Melissa and also attacking Deaton. The other big thing here, and I think this is what sort of stood out to me, is since they've been here, and especially after Deucalion left, the twins have very much been wanting to be in Scott's pack, and they've been willing to do about anything to be in Scott's pack. But as Derek points out, they don't understand what it takes to be in Scott's pack, and that you have to fight for what Scott wants, and that's his friends, and they don't understand that yet. And so I think the way Derek laid it out there, I thought this was a grand way to finally put it out there. This was also foreshadowing someone was going to die. Okay, now moving on to number 4, and this is going to be at Deaton's vet's office. Several of our group have moved on to question Deaton about how the Nogitsune had been trapped before and to see if the power of the Nemeton can be used. Deaton is unsure if that is possible, since the Nemeton basically has been powerless for a long time, but the wood from the Nemeton still does exist, and it's been used over the years to form boxes and containers. And this is where Lydia is going to ask about a Nemeton box that had been used to hold Talia Hell's claws. And when she mentions that to Deaton, Deaton actually looks a little shocked, but he also admits that the box was made from the wood of the Nemeton because he is the actual person who made that box. So it could possibly work to trap the Nogitsune. I thought when looking at this scene, this was a small scene, but I love the idea here of getting more of Deaton's background with Talia Hell. You always sort of wondered, was there something between those two? Yes, he was her advisor, but it sort of has always seemed like maybe he had a little more to do there. And just his face when he realized what Lydia was talking about made you think, hey, there might be something else going on here. Now, next up is point number 5. And when we look at this, we are actually going to arrive at Beacon Hills Hospital along with Nogitsune Stiles. And he is looking for Melissa McCall. Before anyone can locate her, one of the Oni actually stabs the nurse who was going to page Melissa McCall. So now, Stiles and the other Oni are going to be free to wander around the hospital, and chaos is going to ensue as the Oni are attacking nurses, doctors, orderlies, anyone who is even close. Now, we also know that this is a coordinated attack, and this is happening very close to when our group is going to the school and going to be seeing the fake Nogitsune. But the Oni are also going to be at the sheriff's station. One of them is lying on its back. It's after he was shot, and the Oni is going to come back alive and injure the sheriff and perish, so they get cuts on them that is releasing black smoke. We also get to see Agent McCall and Melissa at the hospital. They're discussing Agent McCall's desire to run away again when they are in the elevator and they're going to be attacked by the Oni. Rafi fires his weapons at the Oni when they open the elevator door, but Melissa is also going to be injured, and that black smoke is going to be releasing from her wound as well. Now, to talk about this set of scenes together, I'm going to tell you one of the most epic openings was when this scene started and Nogitsune Stiles was coming into the hospital. When Stiles and the Oni started going around that hospital to Bad Moon Rising playing in the background, I think it's one of the greatest moments in Teen Wolf history. It just was explosive, and just that Stiles was so evil. And I know he's Nogitsune Stiles at the time, but just the way he looked and what they were coming in there to do, it was just awesome. And I loved every second of it. And one thing I like to point out here is all those points we've had before, that was all in the cold open to this episode. This episode opened when Stiles went to the hospital and asked for Melissa McCall. So everything I've already talked about, all that was basically the cold open to the show. Now, moving on to number 6, and we're returning to the Argents. And I'm going to be honest, I'd never really understood exactly where they were in all parts of this episode when they went to the Argents. It seems like they have a bunker somewhere, and that's where they ended up. But to start out with, Isaac is back at the apartment holding one of Allison's Chinese ring daggers. Chris is going to be talking about how she had difficulties learning the ring daggers. Her fingers would be raw. She had to have them all bandaged up. And Isaac tells Chris about Allison's last words, and Chris reveals that Allison had already told him she loved him earlier that night. Chris mentions the ritual of the silver bullet, and Isaac already knows about it. When Isaac learns that Allison was actually making silver arrowheads, he realizes that this is what killed the Oni. Allison had made 5 silver arrowheads, only one was ready when she had to go fight. And so that one arrowhead was what killed the Oni before they killed her. And what had happened, Allison had drawn on the knowledge of her dad's story of using the silver bullet to shatter the Oni's mask, and she realized an arrow would have the same effect, but the arrow hopefully would stick around and poison the Oni. It wouldn't go straight through. And that is actually what had happened. Now, talking about this point, this is one of those that I was wondering how long it was going to take them to put the 2 and 2 together and get 4, because it seemed like they were just going about it all way too slow. And then finally, when Isaac opened up to Chris about what Allison said, he's going to realize, no, she wasn't meaning to tell her dad that she loved him. She was wanting Isaac to tell her dad about the arrowheads. And that's going to change everything. Now, moving on to number 7, and Derek calls Scott to tell him that he has the Triskelion box and will meet Scott at the school. Scott, Kira, Stiles, and Lydia arrive at the school and find themselves in a snow-covered Japanese garden. The Nogitsune is there, and he's surrounded by 4 Oni, and tells Scott, Kira, Stiles, and Lydia that they are between life and death. The Nogitsune claims that Stiles is dying, and everyone he cares about is dying too. And of course, we're going to know what's happening at this point because Deaton has been attacked, the hospital has been attacked, and Melissa has been attacked. So that is all going on while they are in this classroom at school. And we're going to find out that this is basically an illusion. This isn't even the real Nogitsune talking to them. That Nogitsune is actually out confronting Derek. The Nogitsune explains seppuku, a suicidal ritual in Japan, and tells Scott to kill Stiles to win the game. Scott, Kira, and Stiles are going to battle the Oni in the Japanese garden. It's not going to go well. Kira is going to lose her sword, and Stiles is going to pick it up. And as he holds the sword, the katana, against his stomach, he sees a reflection, and he realizes that the Japanese garden and their current situation is just an illusion. He sees school books, he sees a school desk, and he tells Scott and Kira to stop fighting. He's then going to explain that they need a divine move, and they're going to basically line up and walk through the Oni who are going to slash them and cut them, but they all are finally going to get pushed out of the door and back into the school hallway. Now, I thought this was a really well-conceived set of scenes here. I was wondering what in the world was going on here, and that somehow the Nogitsune had conjured this illusion shows just how powerful the Nogitsune was. And with that, you had a situation here where it was down to Stiles to sort of figure out what was going on, because everybody was going to die. And that's not just the people in that room. It was his dad, Parrish, Deaton, Melissa, everybody that he cared about was going to end up dying. And it came down to him to figure out that this is an illusion. And then Scott had to trust him enough to walk through and just let the Oni just cut them to pieces. But it's going to work, and they're going to escape. Now, moving on to number 8, we're actually going to go back, and this is talking about Melissa here at the hospital. Melissa was seriously injured and tells Scott's father that he needs to try again with Scott, and Melissa tells him that Scott doesn't want an apology. He just wants his father to do better. Melissa makes Agent McCall promise to make it worth it and make things work with Scott. Melissa and Rafi get into the corridor and find lots of injured and bloody bodies. Melissa's wound is going to bleed. Rafi calls for help. No one is really coming. Melissa's going to tell Scott's dad that she had told a drunk to leave the house, not to leave Scott's life. We are going to actually see that Melissa's wound is going to bleed, but it has that smoke about it, and so we know that's bad. So not much to say here, but we do learn what the big problem has always been with Scott and his dad, and I thought it was very good that we were able to find this out. Now, moving on to point number 9, Derek is going to arrive at the high school along with the twins to fight the Oni and Nogitsune Stiles. When he arrives, Nogitsune Stiles is there and basically throws a jab at him and the twins because he tells him that he's heard of a alpha pack, but not a pack of former alphas. Of course, he was deriding Derek and the twins some. So, while this is going on, we are also actually going to see Deaton get attacked by Oni as well. But with that, most of this has to do with the fight against Nogitsune Stiles and the Oni outside the school. This is the actual fight that was going on at the time. So the trio of Derek, Ethan, and Aiden struggle to fight the Oni, with Ethan suggesting that Aiden take the Triskelion box to Scott. They're all going to be fighting. The fight is not going all that well, and evil Nogitsune Stiles is looking on like he is winning, when all of a sudden Chris Argent arrives along with Isaac, and they're going to help in the fight. Chris has brought along the remainder of Allison's silver arrowheads to help defeat the Oni. Isaac is going to join the fight. He flips in and is going to help with the fight, and Nogitsune Stiles is going to run away. Derek tells Isaac to take the Triskelion box to Scott while he and Chris continue to fight the Oni. The third Oni is finally defeated by Aiden, who stabs it with one of the silver arrowheads, but in doing so, he is also run through by the Oni's katana, and he collapses. Ethan calls out to his brother, and Aiden pulls the sword from his stomach. Alright, just a couple things on this point, number 9. The first big thing here is it took a little while, I remember, to realize this was the actual battle that was going on to start with. While Scott and Stiles, Lydia, and Kira were all in the classroom, they were sort of in this illusion going on, while this copy of Nogitsune Stiles was outside with the real Oni, and they were trying to take out Derek and the twins. But, of course, help is going to arrive, with Argent finally getting there with the silver arrowheads, and he's going to turn the battle, and eventually Nogitsune Stiles is going to retreat. Now, the big thing here, of course, was Aiden being mortally wounded while killing one of the Oni, and very sad moment, going back to the last season when we thought we had lost both Ethan and Aiden. I really liked their characters, and I was glad they came back for this season of Teen Wolf, and I thought they used them very well, and so it was very sad to see one of them go, especially that they are twins, and this, of course, Aiden was the one who was in love with Lydia, and so, it was one of those just sort of sad moments that we were going to have to lose him. So moving on to number 10, this is right as soon as we come out of the snow-covered classroom, and Nogitsune Stiles is furious. He attacks Scott and shoves him into a locker, shoves Lydia down, and he is just screaming at everybody about the divine move and that he's 1,000 years old and they can't kill him. And that's when Lydia, standing up, reminds Nogitsune Stiles of the scroll they took from Silverfinger, which said that they could change the host of the Nogitsune. That's when Scott is going to attack Nogitsune Stiles, biting his arm, and then Kira is going to stab Nogitsune Stiles through the heart with her katana. As Nogitsune Stiles falls to the ground, a fly is going to emerge from his mouth, and Isaac appears in the hallway with the Triskelion box and traps the fly inside. The Nogitsune's body is going to begin to dry out and crack like clay, eventually collapsing into dust. And as that happens, it blows away. There's going to be a moment of worry as Stiles actually looks like he's getting more sick and he passes out. But it turns out he just fainted. As Scott, Lydia, Kira, and Isaac all survive the encounter, and that's when Lydia realizes something is wrong. Now, this I thought was very interesting that they went back to basically kill the Nogitsune the same way Kira's mom had done it when Satomi actually changed the original Nogitsune, and then Kira's mom actually is the one who stabbed it to finish it off. And then she went and hid the little jar with the fly in it in the Nematon. Moving on to number 11 here, and we're going to first see Melissa McCall snap awake. Her wound now seems to be very shallow and superficial, and we skip over to the sheriff's office where Sheriff Stilinski and Deputy Parrish stand up, and apparently they are all good to go as well. Lydia does sense that something is wrong and rushes outside, while Ethan joins his brother, who is being cradled in Derek's arms. Black goo is dripping from Aiden's mouth, and the brothers are crying. Aiden wants to know if it hurts Ethan as much as it does him, and he laments that it does. He also laments that Lydia was never able to believe that he was one of the good guys, but Derek says she'll believe him now. Ethan places his forehead against his brother's, and Aiden dies. Lydia runs out of the school and sees what has happened, and she turns back around and is hugged by Stiles. We're later going to get to see the Yukimuras removing all the stones from the go board. Melissa is also going to be comforting Scott, and Isaac is going to leave the Argent's apartment. He's leaving with Chris, and he has that Triskelion box with the Nogitsune. Now, nothing really to say on this part or this point. This was just to wrap up, and just the idea that we did lose another member of the cast, and that was Aiden. And also, just the fact that basically it looked like Chris was taking Isaac off to Europe with him, and maybe we'll see something in the future. Now, moving on to point number 12. And 12 is sort of a collection of some things that were going on, and Kira is going to be speaking to Lydia in the hallway at the school, saying she doesn't know how to help Scott and the other werewolves. She doesn't know how to help them with their new she doesn't know how to help them with their loss. She's still just the new girl. At that moment, Coach is going to be showing Malia Tate around the school, and it doesn't look like Kira's going to be the new girl for long. Later on in this point, Malia is going to be in the room with Scott and Stiles, and Scott is teaching her how to flick her claws, and she does manage it rather quickly, basically on the second try, and almost slices Stiles in the process. We're going to get to see Ethan break up with Danny, or actually it was more of Danny breaking up with Ethan because Danny says that Ethan is incredibly good looking and smart and sweet. He just can't date a werewolf. And that sort of brings everyone to the knowledge that Danny knew there were werewolves. Ethan is shocked by this, but he kisses Danny before he leaves. We're also going to see Stiles tearing down all the evidence in his room, all the red yarn, everything that had been going on. He was taking all that down, and when his dad asked him what was going on, he just said that he was clearing his head. We're going to actually also get to see Deaton talking to Scott at the animal clinic, and he's explaining regression to the mean, which he says suggests that things will stop being all bad or all good and revert to somewhere in the middle. Scott is unsure because he doesn't know if that applies to a town like Beacon Hills. Now, this was sort of an interesting set of scenes that all went together, I thought, and part of that is because it felt like the natural end of the episode, but we're going to have one more point here that's going to set a lot of things up. But sort of the biggest things here is it became obvious that Malia is going to be a big part of season number 4 as they are reintroducing her here and reintroducing her into the pack. We also did not know it at the time, but this was going to be Danny's last episode as well. Just the fact that Danny had realized what was going on, he knew about all the supernatural, and he was still willing to date Ethan for as long as he did, I think says a lot about the show. It was also very surprising. It's one of those little facts that you get that you're like, oh, that's very interesting. And so I thought this was a very good set of scenes here. Now, off to our last point, and that is number 13, I do believe. And basically, this is the close of the episode, and it's a little on the weird side. And basically what happens here is we're going to have a scene where Derek is talking to Stiles. And Derek is having some issues because he doesn't know whether he is dreaming or not. And so basically what the gist of all this is Derek remembers being at the loft and the Spanish-speaking hunters attack, and they're looking for the La Loba. Derek thinks this is Cora, but when he says Cora's name, they have no clue who he's talking about. And so at that time, there's an attack. A smoke grenade comes in, and one by one, all those hunters are going to be taken out. And we're going to get to just see a shot of a shotgun firing into Derek's stomach or Derek's chest. And this is going to go back to then Derek talking to Stiles and talking about the myths of how you actually become a werewolf, either being bitten or possibly scratched deeply by one, or drinking rainwater from a werewolf's paw print. And all this is going to take us back to when Peter actually is going to kill Kate, and he basically has his claw marks deep in her neck. And so with that, Derek asks Stiles, how do you know if you're dreaming? And basically Stiles says you don't have the correct number of fingers if you're in a dream. And Derek looks down and he has too many fingers. And then it goes in a flashback back to the loft. And as that gun goes off, the face comes out of the smoke, and it's actually Kate Argent who has returned, and she has shot Derek. And she's turning into some were creature. Now, my reaction to this is it was a little weird, I remember, when we saw this, because as I just said on the last point, this was one of those things I thought everything was over. Once they got done with Scott and the group, I thought the episode was going to be over. And then all of a sudden, we have this addition, this new scene. And this goes back also to explaining a few things that had happened this season that were a little suspicious. Things like the twins being shot at, okay? Derek helping to basically clean the wound of, Aiden at the start of this episode with the lighter. And so with that, this went back and helped explain that. And of course, as we know, this actually set up a big arc in season number 4. So I did enjoy this scene as well. Now, with all that being said, it is time to bring this episode to a close. And with that, I do just want to say how much I enjoyed Divine Move. It was truly a very well written, very well acted episode. Again, I don't know without Dylan O'Brien if our last couple episodes could have been ranked as highly as they are. Just his portrayal of both Stiles and then Nogitsune Stiles was so awesome and so spot on that it really ranked these episodes up here very high for me. And again, I didn't really have any problems with anything in this episode, and that's why it ranks so high for me. So this was number 4 on our countdown of Teen Wolf episodes. So we have 3 more yet to come, and then we're going to be right at the Teen Wolf movie, folks. It is only a few weeks away now. Today is January the 3rd. We have 23 days. Time is flying by. But with that, I hope everybody enjoyed the review. Please hit that subscribe button, like the video, and comment below. And I'll see you next time on the Fandom Realm.